So this is our final formal lesson about the benefits of unity's practical ability in general and Jesus' teachings in particular. I say formal because almost all of our lessons talk about these practical benefits, but this is the conclusion of this series. I've spoken to the value of having an evolving spiritual perspective, which unity offers, including one, a metaphysical perspective of the Bible, which has allowed the timeless perennial truth wisdom of both Hebrew and Jesus' teachings to be more accessible, more relevant, and more transforming, especially within our mystical approach to spirituality. In essence, an invitation to have a direct experience of truth versus just buying into some religious dogma. I talk about this idea about the Bible because for many of us, until, at least I know for me, until I learned about metaphysics, we were sort of, you rejected the Bible or you accepted it on sort of literal terms. And so the unity movement brought a whole different way of looking at the Bible that has just continued to evolve with historical perspectives and hermeneutics and all of that now. So it's been a great opening for a lot of us. Number two, unity offers a construct for God and creation. The ever-expanding, ever-unfolding, upward progressive movement of life governed by divine and immutable principles, our understanding of which continues to evolve according to all sources of knowing, including science and mysticism and all the ways that humans grow and learn. Number three, it provides a meaningful response to the questions, who am I? A spiritual being having a human adventure. And why am I here? What is my purpose? To continually grow and evolve into our wholeness and true essence as spiritual beings having a human adventure. And finally, and perhaps most importantly, unity provides a way of living, as taught by Jesus and interpreted by Charles Fillmore, and in alignment with the perennial wisdom of all sacred traditions. It has tangible, demonstrable, quantifiable, and positive effects on our physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being, both individually and collectively. So as we've looked over the last 6 weeks or so, there are measurable ways that buying into and practicing these teachings affect our lives. This morning, we're going to conclude this series by exploring the benefits of unity's prosperity teachings, or as I like to call it, borrowing from a phrase attributed to Jesus, to have life and have it more abundantly. But first, I want to share this practical illustration of what I believe it means to have life more abundantly. You may recall that I began this series in part due to a UMB website inquiry from a first-time visitor who, admitting he was full of doubts and maybe even suspicions around our teachings, was firmly committed to a determinist, materialistic perspective of atheism. And he concluded by asking, given this understanding that I hold of life, of what value is unity teachings to me? I responded, suggesting that the benefits of unity teachings are largely dependent on the degree to which one is willing to engage them, to explore them, to test them and practice them in their lives. While I also noted that there is documented value of mental, emotional, physical benefits of many of our disciplines, such as meditation, mindfulness, gratitude, compassion, forgiveness, and generosity, as well as belonging to a community. They all have measurable impacts on our lives. Fast forward about 2+ months, during which time I deeply engaged in this question. It was this opening for me. And I began to search out, so exactly what are the values of unity teachings? Admittedly, it was as much for myself and for this community as it was for the individual who was asking the questions. Lose a page. And as I always teach what I most need to learn, the journey has not only been meaningful for me, but I've received a lot of feedback from a lot of you out there who have really enjoyed this series. And a few people, I remember Howard came up to me and said, I was having this conversation with a person and trying to explain unity, and I wish I'd had all of this information then. And so it's worked a lot for me, as it always does when I sort of dive into a topic, but it's been good. But what I want to share this morning, and this is with the permission of this individual. He said I didn't have to keep him anonymous, but I'm going to do that. Allow him to reveal himself if he chooses. More recently, the most recent email I received from him, who has, by the way, continued to attend and listen and question and explore, and he had this to say. I find myself strangely drawn to the cast of characters at Unity Church. While there are still what appear to be insurmountable differences in worldview between my determinist, materialist vantage points and the sweet but somehow hard to pin down, sometimes practical, sometimes magical Unity thinking, I know one thing for sure. I want what I see in your church, the people and the humanity. I want the easy laughter, the shameless willingness to enjoy each other, the comfortable way you invite strangers into the fold. Your joy and comfort with each other speaks to me. I felt cared for and included, with people who demonstrate open hearts and welcoming souls. So as I read that, I had to smile, and I had to give thanks for this community and conclude that this is what it means to me to have life and have it abundantly. That other people can feel it in our presence. And I believe that this experience that we share here is the result, the direct result of, as we affirm weekly during our blessing of the offering, our collective commitment to the spiritual work of love and transformation in our lives and in our world, and being willing to dedicate ourselves to more fully expressing the Christ light that is the truth of our being and invites all people to know God's love. When we walk this path, we get results. We get benefits in our lives, and they're benefits that other people can witness and experience. And so it's from this perspective that I want to explore a little more deeply Unity's prosperity teachings this morning, which for me began with the divine idea that it is God's good pleasure to give us the kingdom, which aligned with the even more foundational shift Unity offered that I spoke of a few weeks ago, recognizing ourselves as beloved children of God rather than sinners who needed to be saved through the sacrifice of Jesus' life or through demands of certain kind of worship or any of those kinds of things. Putting it in less biblical terms, it's the idea that the universe is friendly and supportive of life in general, rather than a force that is against us and we must overcome. And then, much like Unity's teachings around healing, the prosperity teachings included practices where we could release our outer-based fears and replace them with understanding faith and trust that what we need will be provided. It also teaches us to release our conscious and subconscious error thoughts and beliefs like money is evil, or I'm not deserving, or there's never enough. Reprogramming our thinking to more closely align with the truth, ultimately realizing that our lives happen and demonstrate from the inside out. Meaning thoughts and beliefs held in our minds, consciously or unconsciously, create and determine our life experiences. Now you guys may be getting tired of me having you join in the mantra about life happening from the inside out. But what I have found is that is the primary shift that we're being called to make daily. Because as we live in the world, it feels like it's happening to us. And the race consciousness is that life kind of happens to us. So I don't think we can remind ourselves too often that it's the other way around. That when we want to change our life, we need to change ourselves. We need to change our thinking rather than trying to mess around or fix what's out there. Fillmore defines spiritual prosperity as being founded on understanding of the inexhaustible, omnipresent substance of spirit as the source of supply, which is in contrast to the material belief that the possession of things is what constitutes our prosperity. Fillmore's teaching is in alignment with the scripture from Matthew chapter 6, verse 19 through 21, that advises us to not store up for ourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust consume and where thieves break in and steal, but store up for ourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust consumes and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where our treasure is, there our hearts will be also. In other words, prosperity is about much more than money and possessions. I still have to admit, however, that early on, as I came into Unity Prosperity teachings, it was very easy to get caught up in the material demonstrations of prosperity and overall outer well-being. It was during the time that, in fact, the prosperity gospel was moving through a lot of Christian churches. And there were human potential movements that were about us being able to manifest things. And then came the secret, if many of you recall, about that we just have to visualize that red Cadillac and we can put it into our driveway. I too got caught up in that at the beginning, and after a period of time, I started passing judgment about myself and about that whole idea that we get so focused on the material. I have come to realize, however, that it was simply starting from where we were, from where I was, and that's the process of spiritual growth. It's the building blocks that we're still focused on the outer, and as we practice those principles, we learn that there's more to it, and we go deeper and deeper. Like many others, I first came into Unity through a health challenge, not of my own, but of my late husband's experience of having cancer. That need for his healing and my deep desire for finding a spiritual grounding is what called us and allowed us to, or encouraged us to stay in Unity. With Rory's life literally on the line, notice the little book reference there, we were inspired and motivated to go deep into the healing journey, open and willing to be transformed at depth, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. And we did that. We jumped in with both feet, even to the point of answering the call to ministry. What I realized in preparing this lesson, teaching what I most need to learn, is that I didn't truly get Unity's prosperity teachings in depth until I faced what constituted a similar life-challenging conditions around having life abundantly. To be clear, I studied and taught prosperity principles. We began tithing 10% of our income. I used affirmations and definitely dedicated my life to seeking first the kingdom of God. All that came pretty easily, and I could feel transformations. My life was abundant. It was abundant in love and in family and in community and in God and in purpose and meaning. It was working. But as is always the case, life started changing. I lost my dad in 2002, my mom in 2005, Rory in 2007, my house in 2010 after the 2008 crash, and finally started facing my son's addiction problems in 2011. And that lasted until 2014, and it had begun before 2011. Then, due to a multitude of issues, including our nation's economy and the decline in church attendance in general, our own church community started facing financial challenges, as many of you remember, until the ability to continue to pay my full salary became a serious challenge. Now, while I knew I wasn't solely responsible for this situation, I also knew in my heart that prosperity consciousness in this community began with me. And so I realized that I wasn't there and I had some work to do. As I now look back at the events, as I wrote this talk about the preceding decade, it's no wonder that my heart and soul and awareness was not grounded in prosperity consciousness, because I had a lot of healing to do. But the good news was that that thing in me realized that this was a spiritual wake-up call. It was a huge opportunity for me to grow. With my very livelihood at stake, just like Rory's very life was at stake, I was ready and willing to do the work, to surrender to the process, and to be transformed at depth, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. The transformative experiences I went through over the next few years didn't occur in a neat and or linear fashion, but they all shared a common factor, which was that I was consciously and continually saying yes. I also want to acknowledge that my journey that I was sharing with this community as I was going through it was also amazingly supported by our leadership council. Each leadership council that went through those years, as we all began to work together and search for what true prosperity meant and how it was we were going to manifest that in our community. Seeking to heal, surrender, grow, and evolve through each challenge into greater wholeness, which is what I've come to understand is the true meaning of prosperity. the true meaning of how we have life more abundantly is by embracing it, and rather than hiding, rather than protecting ourselves, step into each new opportunity to become more of who we're called to be. For example, my journey involved seeing and pausing the busyness that I had engaged in to help me cope with these multiple losses, especially the loss of my partner and husband. And to reverse that, to intentionally make time and space to revisit and complete my grief journey. I stepped back from a number of the committees I'd been on and the number of national programs I'd been involved in, and began to say, I need time and space for me. In that process, I realized I had to begin to make the shift from coping to living. It also required me to do some further healing and forgiveness work around losing my home. Even as I was grateful for the unseen and unexpected miracle of my current home in Castroville, manifesting literally in perfect divine order as I released my home in Monterey, I realized that I'd been holding on to an old belief that my security depended upon owning a home. An error belief that was keeping me stuck in lack until it came into consciousness, and I realized that it was not a true belief, that it was just something that I had grown up with, and I released it into greater freedom. Probably the most difficult lesson in my life during this time was surrendering the illusion of my control over my son's life and choices. In essence, I realized I could love him, but I couldn't keep him or fix him. A realization that included the heartbreaking open acceptance that he may not make it through this journey, and that there was nothing I could do about it other than be a presence of love in his life. Well, as these lessons continually prove to us, not surprisingly, within a year of me letting go, it allowed a space, I'm not owning that, but I just think that's how it worked, that Kyle created the circumstances, messy and complicated and not ones that I would have chosen, but the circumstances that did lead him to Genesis House and his successful recovery. He will be 5 years clean in October of this year. And as many of you know, it also allowed him to reclaim and manifest his dreams, professional and personal. He's getting married next year on 7/11. And so as I released him to his own good, he found that essence within him. So I'm grateful. Surrendering that illusionary control over Kyle's life actually occurred almost simultaneously with completing my grief journey around worry. And that's not really a surprise because the two were intricately involved in one another. Both were making me realize that I had largely been coping. Even though I had filled my life with what looked like lots of living, it was really about keeping busy so that I didn't have to go and face all of the demons, the fears, and such that were still within me. But I realized here it was time. It was time that I let go of that and that I started looking forward, that I started beginning to live rather than just cope. But there was still the precipitating circumstance to this wake-up call that had to be dealt with, the seemingly chronic financial challenges of our Unity Church community. Paralleling my personal healing journey, I and our community were also working to fully embrace the foundational shift in consciousness from our Western paradigm of more is better to the transformative and game-changing idea of enough. I give thanks to Dan Schaefer, who he and I spent many mornings exploring and just trying to open ourselves and trying to understand. And I remember changing the words to songs here so we stopped talking about more than enough and embrace this idea of enough. It has fundamentally changed my life. I can say that today, looking back, realizing that I live now from this knowing that there's enough rather than always seeking more. When we live from that sense of enoughness, the incessant drive for more simply dissolves into nothingness, to be replaced with the experience of present abundance, deep gratitude, and radical generosity. We start being able to look at, from whatever I have, what is it that I have to share and give? In our unity community here, this looked like shifting our focus from worrying about attracting more people and money to an appreciative inquiry into the already existing value in who we are, what we have to share, and what we do well. And we doubled down on that. Of course, whenever we shift our focus from what's lacking to the blessings that are already present, the law of attraction is triggered. In essence, when we begin to focus, whatever we begin to focus on expands in our consciousness and our experience. So if we look at lack, we experience more lack. When we focus on our blessings multiply. Personally, shifting my focus to the resources I already had and realizing that there were enough, absent that sort of nagging fear about, well, maybe we always need more for that security, for that rainy day, etc. When I finally just sort of surrendered into, I have enough, and began to live from that, I saw that I could take a 35% cut in my salary, which balanced our UMB budget and has kept it balanced over the last 5 years or so. And it also gave me the time I needed to start living, because as I took the pay cut, I took some weeks off during the year, as you've all witnessed. I made a list of things to do that would bring me joy, including attending Giants games. Yes, that's where it started. One of the first things on the list, but I would actually go to Giants games. Going to the Ashland Shakespeare Festival, visiting New England during the fall, traveling to Europe, and regularly visiting my grandkids, among other things. Now, I had no idea how these things would manifest or where the money would come from, but I just started making plans. I started reading about the places I wanted to go to. I started looking at how much would it cost to do this. Things just started coming into my life. My good friend Mike Moran planned a group trip to Ireland, and a year and a half out, I just said, I'm going to do it. And I just started putting the money away, and the money was there. To make a long story short, miracle follows miracle, and wonders never cease. I've successfully fulfilled every joy item on that first lift, and as you've all witnessed, more and more beyond that. I've gone back to Spain and then to Mexico and just many more Giants games, and just I feel like I am truly now living life abundantly. I'm no longer coping. I've stepped into that transition. Through all of this, the key lesson I've internalized is that when money seems to shrink, when money issues come up, whether it's in my personal life or in our church, I realize now it has nothing to do with finances. I immediately start looking at, where are we afraid? Where are we in reaction? Whether it's an election or a war or some other crisis happening in the world, all of those feelings, all of those fears, when we try and just stuff them down, manifest in a lack of financial or other kinds of prosperity. It can also manifest in health issues. It doesn't seem to do that for me. For me, it's always about finances. And the neat thing is now I don't start worrying about those. I immediately go, okay, so what's blocking this flow in my life right now? Finally, this shift from more is better to the consciousness of enough is also key to our collective capacity to achieve sustainability, as well as a more equitable distribution of the Earth's resources, including protecting the Earth and all of its diversity, ensuring that we all will have life and have it abundantly. Namaste.
you now, if it's comfortable, to gently close your eyes. Begin to let the outer world fade away and bring your energy and your focus to the inner. Taking some deep breaths to help you arrive in this present moment. Breathing in, God is here. Breathing out, I am home. Again, breathing in, God is here. And breathing out, I am home. Let each breath you take help you arrive more into this now moment. Become aware of your body, the places where it makes contact with the pew, your feet on the floor, grounding you into Mother Earth. Now consciously release any place that you are tight or stressed or holding tension. Just allow that to release with each breath. Relaxing into this moment. Knowing that in this moment you have everything you need. There is no place you need to go. Nothing you need to do. You are safe in this moment, held and embraced by the loving arms of Spirit. As you feel that presence of God becoming more and more aware, more present, more real, I invite you to just take a quick inventory of your life. Your home, your car, maybe precious and beloved belongings, special things that mean a lot to you. Family, friends, community, beloved pets, nature, maybe books that you love. Just scanning through all of these things in your life. Now think of your friendships, your joy, your hobbies, fun things you love to do, your work, meaningful activities of all sorts. Look around at all this abundance in your life. And as you look around and take that mental inventory, I invite you to just allow the word enough to come into your awareness. Enough. It is all enough. I am blessed to overflowing. I have everything I need. In fact, I am so abundant, I have enough to share with others around me. Enough. enough. That is when that true abundance can be born in us. Enough fills us to bursting. Enough fills us with gratitude, with satisfaction. What we focus on expands. So I invite you now to focus on the enoughness that is all around you, everywhere you look. It is enough. For a moment in the silence. There's the call for us to come out at this time. So as you gently begin to release this sacred time of prayer, I invite you to think now of the source of all of this abundance. That one power and one presence, God the good. And let your heart be filled with gratitude, opening yourself ever more to the flow of God's good in